Today we are going to be doing a little end of the year book haul, just talking about some books that I've accumulated over the last couple months. Some of them I will hopefully get to by the end of the year. Others are definitely going to trickle into the new year and beyond. I have a total of 20 books that I want to talk about. So I'm going to break the 20 books out into two groups. The first group is going to be books that I bought with my own money or just acquired on my own. And the second group of books is going to be books that were gifted to me, whether it be by friends or publishers. So let's just jump right into it. So the first four books are books that I got from Half Price Books. I live near one of the biggest half price books in the country, so I always have a time when I go in there. So the first book that I got was The Apollo Murders by Chris Hadfield. I love any books that have to deal with space. I also love a good murder mystery. And so this book seems to combine those two things where there's like a murder that happens in space. And the premise of this book is that the Americans at NASA find out that Russians are using some type of spacecraft to spy on them. And so to kind of get rid of this spacecraft or to prevent the Russians from getting more information, NASA is kind of on this like little space race. However, once a deadly mission happens, it's kind of revealed that not everybody is who they say they are on this mission. But the next book that I'm going to talk about is a book that I know many of people have read because everybody talks about this ending, both in the book and the Netflix adaptation, and that is Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. And it's funny because even on the inside flap of this book, it says, "Why is everyone talking about the ending of Behind Her Eyes?" But what I've gathered that this book is about, there is a woman who, she has a night out on the town. She meets a man, they kiss, it's great. But it's not so great when she goes into her new job and realizes that the man that she kissed is actually her boss. So she's like, ooh, yikes. She's like, I need to make some new friends because clearly this man's not gonna work out. I just need to find some girlfriends. She finds a girlfriend, turns out it's the boss's wife. And the inside flap just says, oh, if you think you know where this book is going from there, you're wrong. Because I really had some thoughts after that, but we'll see what it's like. The whole premise of the book, I guess, is just that there's something wrong with the marriage between our main character's new friend and her husband, which she kissed at the bar. So I feel like there could be a lot of different ways this book goes, but I've heard nothing but good things about it. All right, and so up next we have Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby. So I previously read Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby, and I absolutely loved that book. So I was really interested in just picking up more of his writing, and I know the book that came out right before Razorblade Tears was Blacktop Wasteland. And so this book follows a character named Bug, and he's tried to leave his life of crime behind him, turn over a new leaf as he enters fatherhood. However, life is lifing. Bills are tight, you know, and he's like, I might need to dip my toes back into my life of crime. And there is an opportunity that comes along with like a jewelry heist of some sort. So we kind of follow him as he's grappling between his old life as a criminal and his new life that he has like as a father, and this new life where he's just trying to better himself. So I'm interested to see where the author takes this book because I did enjoy Razorblade Tears so much. And the last book that I got from Half Price Books was The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. So I've heard a lot of good things about Simone St. James as well. I haven't read anything else by her, but as I was just perusing the shelves, you know, reading inside flaps of books, I picked this one up. I know that other people have read it. I can't really remember, you know, what they were saying about it, but it seems intriguing to me. This book is about a girl who is a true crime blogger, and she started this blog after she was abducted as a child. And so she stumbles across this woman who might be connected to some murders that happened in 1977. Those crimes were unsolved. But when our main character comes across this lady who agrees to be interviewed, she's realizing there may be some connections between her and these past murders. And as she gets to know this woman a little bit more, she's like, something's off about this lady. I'm not sure what, but I don't like it. So I'm really interested to get into this one, and just to see if I find a new author that I could potentially want to read more of her works. So the next two books I'm going to talk about are just books that I picked up on some travels I went on. So I recently went to Seattle just to visit a friend, and of course I had to go visit a few bookstores, and so I picked up a few books there. The first one I got was The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo. I've just heard people rant and rave about The Empress of Salt and Fortune, and I will say that I have tried to listen to this on audio a few times because the audiobook is only like an hour and a half or 2 hours because it's so short. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't get into it via audio. So I figured I would just pick up the actual paperback version of it. And you know, usually when I do book hauls, I try to read like the synopsis of them before I talk about it. And I read the synopsis of this and it's still really hard for me to figure out like how to describe it. So I'm just gonna read a couple snippets from the back. And it just says, a young royal from the far north is sent south for a political marriage. Her brothers are dead, her armies and their war mammoths long defeated and caged behind their borders. This evocative debut follows the rise of the Empress In-Yo, who has few resources and fewer friends, but she will bend history to her will and bring down her enemies piece by piece. You know, and the people who are blurbing this, you know, I haven't read anything by these authors, but I know that they're popular. Shauna McGuire has blurbed this. R.F. Kuang has blurbed this. So, you know, I'm excited to get into it. It's really short, and I actually do have a video planned where I will be reading this. So stay tuned for that. And the other book that I got while I was in Seattle, not short at all. It is over 400 pages, and that is A Master of Jinn by P. Djeli Clark. So I actually read Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark around this time last year, and I loved it. It was one of those books that just like really stuck with me, and to this day it still sticks with me. And just like the writing style and how the author really immerses you very quickly into the writing and into the story that they are trying to tell. And so I've heard really good things about this whole world. And while this book is really thick, I'm motivated to read it, okay? And this is another one. I'm just gonna read a couple of things from the back. So this says, set in Cairo, 1912. There's a woman named Fatma, and she is the youngest woman working for the Ministry of Alchemy, Enchantments, and Supernatural Entities. And so when someone murders the members of a secret brotherhood dedicated to one of the most famous men in history, Fatma is called to the case. And this famous man, he transformed the world 40 years ago when he opened up the veil between the magic and mundane realms before vanishing into the unknown. All right, and then this next book is a book that I actually got from a little free library. So I recently was just trying to get rid of some of the books on my shelves, and I donated a lot of them to like little free libraries that are around my area. And as I was doing that, you know, of course I had to, you know, peruse and see what else was in those little free libraries, if there's anything that I wanted to read. And the book I picked up was The Cartographers by Pang Shepard. So this follows a woman whose family is into cartography, which is just like the study and creation of maps. I think, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but she ends up having a falling out with her father after he fires her over like this really mundane map that she didn't really think had a lot of significance. But once her father is found dead in his New York City office, the map is still laying there on his desk, and she realizes that that map has a little bit more meaning than she thought it did. So she goes on this quest, I guess, to try to figure out why the map is so important, who killed her father, and she ends up unveiling a lot of family secrets along the way. Excited to get into this one as well, but this is definitely one that I definitely don't have a timeline on when I'm gonna read it, but I'm glad that I was able to pick it up. And then the next two books and the last two books in the this first group that I'm talking about of books that I acquired myself. The first one is The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. So I'm easily influenced sometimes, especially when it comes to books. And one of my friends on Instagram, she raved about this book. She said it was really good. And so I instantly just picked it up. It was like 3 sentences worth of a review, but I trust her, so I was like, I'm gonna pick it up. And don't come for me. I have not read anything by Tiffany D. Jackson yet. I own a few things by her, I just haven't read any, but I figured this might be a good place to start. I know that this is essentially just a retelling of Carrie, and I'm not gonna lie, I also haven't read Carrie, watched Carrie, any of it, but I do know the main gist of it, and I know that it's about a young girl who she's kind of made fun of, she's deemed kind of weird, and then she finally thinks that, you know, she's being accepted when she gets nominated as prom queen, I believe. But the night of prom, they ended up throwing a whole bunch of like pig's blood on her, and the girl goes crazy and she be doing a whole bunch of like magic stuff to people, and she ends up like slaughtering a whole bunch of people at prom. That's what I know about Carrie. And I heard that this is a retelling of Carrie, but it has more elements of like racism and prejudice kind of interwoven in there. So I'm excited to get to this one. And I keep saying that I'm excited to get to all of these. Obviously, I'm excited because I bought them. And I spent money on them, but I also do a bad job of actually reading books when they come out, so I kind of want to read this one sooner rather than later, just so I can be hip and in the know with everybody else. All right, and then up next we have Jackal by Erin E. Adams, and this one I picked up because, speaking of Instagram friends, I am doing a buddy read with one of my friends over on Instagram, and we decided to pick up Jackal. And this just says, a young black girl goes missing in the woods outside her White Rust Belt town, but she's not the first and she may not be the last. And honestly, that's all I really need to know and all I really want to know, especially because I am doing this buddy read this month for sure. I don't want to read too much into it, but I have heard good things about from the few people who have read this book, so I will definitely have this in my quarterly wrap-up that will be going out next month. So my camera battery just died, so if my angle changed a little bit, that's why. But I think that's the perfect segue into our second group of books, which are books that were gifted to me either just like by friends or by publishers. So the first one that I'll talk about is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I know that right now is not the first time you're probably hearing about this book being out in the world. This book has kind of just taken social media by storm, right? Because if you are a certain age, you are familiar with Jeanette McCurdy. She was kind of came to fame from the Nickelodeon show iCarly, and so in this book she discusses her time on iCarly, her relationship with her mother, who I believe was her manager during that time, and she really kind of goes into a lot of like the trauma that she experienced, both from her mom and from being on the show. I just hear that a lot is talked about in this book. Okay, and since that's nonfiction, I will also go into the other nonfiction that I was gifted, which was A Lovely Girl, A Tragedy of Olga Duncan and the Trial of One of California's Most Notorious Killers by Deborah Holt Larkin. What a title. And at the top of this, it just says, the incredible story of a 1958 murder that ended with the last woman to ever be executed in California. A murder so twisted it seems ripped from a Greek tragedy. Essentially, this book covers the case of a woman named Olga Duncan, and Olga Duncan was pregnant when she disappeared. And the case really gets interesting when they find out that Olga Duncan's mother-in-law was really controlling and manipulative when it came to Olga and how her and her son were starting a family and all of that. So that's kind of what this is going into. I think I need to do just like a full like true crime reading vlog at some point, because I have so much true crime on my shelves that I really am interested in reading. And I know that true crime is like one of those topics and one of those genres that like not a lot of people want to read, and they can't read a lot of it, which I completely understand. And so I hope to maybe just do a vlog where I'm reading a whole bunch of true crime and letting you guys know like which true crime books are like actually worth reading if you're only going to read like a few. So yeah, that'll be coming at some point. Okay, so we talked about some nonfiction and some true crime. So now let's move into a few books that are fictional mystery and thrillers and fictional crime dramas. So first up is The Black Echo by Michael Connelly. And so I was gifted this by a friend because we had recently watched Bosch, and I didn't realize that that show was actually based off of these books. But I know that this is like a 20 book series. So I was a little apprehensive about getting into this one. But I am excited to read it just because I have watched a lot of the seasons of Bosch, and I really enjoy the way that the stories are told, and I really enjoy the main character. He's kind of like cynical, and he's very like straight-laced almost, but he breaks and bends the rules a little bit to get his job done. And I just really love the way the stories are told. So I'm interested to see how the books compare to the show. Up next, we have The Binding Room by Nadine Matheson. So I have one other book on my shelf by Nadine Matheson, and it's called The Jigsaw Man. And I haven't read it yet, but that book and this book are connected. I don't necessarily know if they're sequels, but they're part of the same universe. So sometimes when I like get these books, you know, I like read through the synopsis and stuff. I'm like, ooh, yeah, that sounds good. But then if I haven't read it in a while, and I go back and read it, I'm like, I get surprised all over again. And that's how I just felt with like reading the first paragraph of the inside flap of this. And it just says, when Detective Angelica Henley is called to investigate the murder of a popular preacher in his own church, she discovers a second victim, tortured and tied to a bed in an upstairs room. He is alive, but barely, and his body shows signs of a dark religious ritual. Ooh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I've been really interested in Nadine Matheson's like writing. Every time I read like a synopsis for one of her books, like The Jigsaw Man and this, they are so intriguing. So I'm really hoping that once I actually read one of the books, I'm not disappointed, and this could be like a new favorite crime thriller author for me. And I feel like there's not a lot of like Black crime thriller authors out there and crime mystery authors out there. So I'm really hoping that I like this and I can keep giving Nadine some of my money. Even though I didn't spend any money on this and the publisher sent it to me, I want to spend money on her. I really do. So then we have Before You Knew My Name by Jacqueline Bublitz, and it is about this woman who is looking into this case of this 18-year-old girl who went missing in New York City. And originally she was marked as like a Jane Doe, but they do know a little bit about her. And so as our main character is like looking into the missing persons case, she starts to realize that her life is starting to mirror this Jane Doe, or the Jane Doe, her name is actually Alice Lee. From the synopsis I'm getting, yes, it's kind of like a murder mystery, but I think it's written a little bit more lyrically than that, and you're supposed to get more about the life of Alice and maybe some of the struggles that she went through, opposed to like the actual murder mystery itself. That's just the vibe that I'm getting, but we'll see once I read it. Okay, but a book that seems to actually be a murder mystery is The Appeal by Janice Hallett. And this also says, one murder, 15 suspects, can you uncover the truth? And so this follows like a theater group, and one of the granddaughters of one of the main people in the theater group is diagnosed with cancer, and the theater group starts to, or tries to, raise money for treatments to help this woman's granddaughter. However, people are questioning if the treatments are going to actually work, and things start to get heated. But then the next day, someone goes kaput, and they're like, what happened? I know that yesterday's meeting got a little hot and heavy, but who would have killed this person? And so we're figuring that out in this book, and I love a good true murder mystery. This book is also in mixed media, so there looks like there are call records and emails and texts, I guess. I don't know why I thought if it was a theater group it was like an old-timey book, but it seems to involve some text in there. So yeah, mixed media. I always love a good mixed media novel. It just makes it go by a little bit faster. Then we have The Golden Spoon by Jessa Maxwell. And this book I'm excited to read next month in particular because it's giving me the Great British Baking Show, but with a murder on it. And that's what you can see. You even see the little castle, you know, it's a spoon because they're in a cooking show and then a murder happens. That's literally all you need to know. And while I say that it's the Great British Bake Off and a murder, the front of this says it's Knives Out meets Agatha Christie. So, I mean, all of those combined, I definitely have to get to this next month. And hopefully it lives up to all the hype that I just gave it in the last 30 seconds. And speaking of books that I know that I'm gonna read next month because it's giving holiday, it's giving Christmas, is Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrane. And this is the same author that wrote The Charm Offensive, and I was obsessed with The Charm Offensive. I'm really picky when it comes to romances and like my taste in romances, but The Charm Offensive was just, it really did things for me. So I'm really excited that I now have another book by Alison Cochrane. So this book follows a girl who has a little meet cute on Christmas Eve at a bookstore. Like, first of all, I love a good meet cute, but it ends up only being like a one night thing because some sort of betrayal happens the next morning. Our main character ends up losing her job, and you know, it's not a great situation. But our main character, she finds a job at a local coffee shop where she meets a guy named Andrew. And Andrew cooks up this plan and says, hey, we should have a marriage of convenience. Also, another trope that I like, fake dating, dating of convenience, marriage of convenience. Love it. He's like, hey, let's just get married so that I can get my inheritance and we can split the money and we both don't have to work at this coffee shop no more. She's like, okay, cool, let's do it. But she goes to meet Andrew's family for the holiday break, and guess who his sister is? That's right. That's right. The girl that she had the meet cute with. So I'm pumped for this one. I think out of everything that I've hauled so far, this is probably one of the things I'm most excited about. So continuing on this like contemporary-ish theme, we have Parish by LaToya Watkins, and this follows a Black family and it's set in Texas, and this family has just lost their grandmother, and it follows multiple perspectives of different people in the family. And in this family's reunion, a lot of family secrets are revealed and trauma is just brought about. And so, you know, usually I'm not someone who enjoys or gravitates reading books like this that talk about like family traumas. However, because I don't read a lot of things like this, I figured it'd be good just to give myself a little bit of diversity when it comes to reading and just try something new. My reading tastes always change every few years. And so because I haven't read anything like this in a while, I figured I'm gonna give it a go. And the last two books I will talk about are books that kind of fall into like a sci-fi, fantasy-ish type of genre. And the first one is The Awoken by Caitlin Monroe Howes. So The Awoken follows a woman who finds out that she has terminal cancer, and her only second chance at life is through cryogenics, you know, so she has to go to sleep and get frozen. And so then we are brought 100 years later, and now there is an ethics debate about if bringing someone back from the dead is ethical and if it should be done. So anybody who is awoken, these people who went through cryogenics and, you know, are now awake, they are deemed illegal and they are to be shot on sight. So we're following this entire experience of this woman and what it's like for her existence to be illegal. And you know, I appreciate some of the blurbs that are actually on the back of this book, because I think anytime you talk about something that's kind of in the near future, or what I'm assuming is that this book is going to have some social commentary in it, you know, sometimes it's hard to reconcile this fake future with like what we're currently living through. And so one of the blurbs on the back, which is from Issa Rae, which I think is kind of random, but I like the blurb. It just says, "It is a heart-pounding tale that helps people not only process what is happening in the world around them, but also to understand how they can actively play their part to create a more accepting future." And I think that's great. And I think that gives me a little bit more hope going into the book, because I know sometimes coming out of books like this, I could feel a little down about the current state of the world. So I definitely appreciate that. All right, so we have one book left, and that is The Closters. I know I'm not saying that right. I can already guarantee you I'm not. By Katie Hayes. And this book follows like a mysterious deck of tarot cards that a group of people find as they're working in this like Gothic museum. And the tarot cards are rumored to actually be able to tell the future. But this woman who's working in this museum is actually trying to figure out if that tale is correct and how accurate these tarot cards actually are about telling the future. Never read anything by this author, but anytime that I see like a short book that has any type of like magical element in it, I'm gonna pick it up, because I always like to have a little bit of magic without having to read a 500-page epic fantasy. So whew, all right, so I made through talking through all those books, and you made it through this entire video, and I'm proud of both of us. And I'm glad that we're both here. And as always, if you made it to the end, you are literally my absolute favorite, my little tater. What is that? Tater tot, that's right. And let me know down below in the comments if you've read anything that I mentioned in this video. Also, let me know what you're reading in the next couple months, what you've hauled recently, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.